Okay folks, so I had the request come in to make a quick video about what I feel are the pros and cons of the Hobie Outback versus the Old Town PDL. I've been fishing on this Hobie here for, well, since I got it in 2021. I bought it brand new, and I just recently acquired the PDL used. So let me just tell you what I've learned so far. So I fished this one a lot. I fished the Hobie a lot, and as you can see, I've modified the hell out of it. So I'm not going to be talking about what I did to modify the kayak. Just some pros and cons of it in terms of usefulness for me. So I'll start with the Hobie. Let's start with the back, actually, because that's one thing that I noticed right away. I feel is superior in the Old Town, that the rudder comes completely out of the water. I fish in places like Tamales Bay where there's a lot of weeds, and to be able to pull up and clear your rudder is huge. I had an incident fishing, crab fishing with the Outback, where I inadvertently got a rope tangled up on the rudder underneath. Clearing the rudder was really difficult on the Outback. The other thing that I don't like about this setup here on the Outback is that the rudder, even stowed, sits underneath the water line. And so when you land, or when you're taking your kayak off the truck or whatever, and you don't have this guy on it, inadvertently I was putting scrapes and scratches and pressure, and even bent the original rudder on the Outback. So the rudder on the Old Town wins, in my opinion, for several reasons. So the ones mentioned, but also I like the fact that what actually drives the rudder or pushes it are these metal cables. In Hobie, it's, and incidentally, I use this orange tape to be visible. I fish in places with a lot of boats, so these little strings, I don't trust them as much. Also, the PDL, the Old Town, once you have a heading, once you put that rudder where you want it to go, I could take my hands off of the controls, and you can even tighten down with a knob your heading, if you will, and it keeps a real straight line. It tracks like very, very well. With a Hobie, I find that I've always got my hand on the rudder controls. Advantage of the Hobie is you've got one on both sides with the Outback, so that's actually pretty sweet. But the rudder commands a little bit more attention on the Outback than it does on the PDL. So in terms of rudders, I think overall the PDL wins. Plus, it's a lot longer when it gets into the water, and I feel that at lower speeds you have more rudder command with the PDL versus the Outback. You have to get going till you feel any real command with the rudder, whereas this one, it just catches the water faster. They both track wonderfully. Both kayaks are extraordinarily stable. I can stand up on both of them, no problems there. So moving forward from that, just overall, like I said, they both track very well. You can stand on both of them, both extremely stable. Speed-wise, though, pedal power, the PDL is faster, for sure. But we'll get into the drives in a minute. So moving forward on the kayak, what I wish the PDL had more of is rails, because I use them. As you can see, I use it to put a extra rod holder or a camera mount or whatever. In the case of my Hobie, I wanted to have much faster access to my paddle, so I was able to put these individual paddle holders on this back rail and front rail, and it's sweet because it freed up my oar holder for my gaff. I put on the anchor track, so that's irrelevant here. On the Old Town, you know, you've got one place for the oar, and you've only got that track in the front, so I can't duplicate this setup or any of this other anchoring stuff on the Outback. That's a downside that the Hobie has a plus on. In terms of the space in the back, both relatively similar. I like the fact that I have all of these rail mounts means that I can put these kind of anchor points here. When I'm crab fishing, I'm able to anchor all of my hoop nets back here. I haven't quite figured out how to work it on the Old Town because all you get is this cord. There isn't anything else to anchor anything to. Rod holders, the Old Town chose these insertable, screwed on rod holder inserts that otherwise are attached to a hole in the kayak, where in the Hobie they're all roto-molded into the plastic. This is rock solid. A buddy of mine with this exact same kayak had a fishing rod holder contraption that he made out of PVC. The kayak flipped over off his truck and this snapped off, cracked the kayak. It was a bit of a mess, where I feel like this would have taken that blow and kept on going. I use these spots here on the kayak a lot. They're not present on the Old Town. So in terms of mounts and everything else, Hobie wins for sure. And these tracks are way more robust. You can even see how my fish holders, rod holder from Yak Attack is already popping off of that rail. Just not nearly as robust as it is on the Hobie. The PDL has a mid-point access under the seat, which allows you to stuff some things into the back of the kayak. I do wilderness camping, so it's nice to be able to put some things inside of the hole, and you have to buy an accessory, a different opening here for Hobie. So that's a sweet advantage, but you know, with dry bags, it really doesn't matter. Moving forward to the seat. This seat is really comfortable. The Hobie seat is great. The one thing I wish it could do was recline a lot, because sometimes, you know, I'll just lean back on that kayak, which I'm able to do almost to a recline. It's sweet. You can take a nap on the water if you need to. But on your body, this seat is superior. That one I have to use, you know, cushions like this. So I prefer this seat when it's adjusted to me. All of this stuff seems superfluous to me. So I wish Hobie would gone with a simpler strap adjustments like Old Town. It's robust. There's nothing really to break. And you can adjust it rather easily, so I don't see much advantage to this. It's kind of like a set it once and forget it sort of thing. So you know, all these bells and whistles just added cost to a seat that otherwise really you never use. Once you set it, like I said, you forget it. So I wish Hobie had a simpler system, only for cost reduction, really. The other thing that I really don't like about the Hobie is actually, here, let me get this loose so I can describe a real headache. Getting this seat into position is a pain in the ass. In fact, oh wow, I pulled it off on the first time. Generally speaking, I've got to do that over and over again until it actually engages, where that system is simply a lot more straightforward. And with the Old Town, you have quite a lot of adjustment. Your seat can go way forward or way back. So I'll get that into that in a minute, because in the Hobie, that adjustment for your leg length really is right here on the PDL. So your seat is set on how far back it is relative to the pedals, and the pedals are adjusted closer, farther from you here in the drive. That one, the drive distance, I mean, it sits in, there's no adjustments on the drive itself. It's the seat you can move back and forth. So I think there's much more room for adjustments on the Old Town than there are in the Hobie Outback. The rails. So having, again, a rail in the back is an advantage to me. These H rails, frankly, they never feel stable enough for me. You know, I'm trolling for salmon and all sorts. I do halibut fishing, whatever. So I'm always kind of trolling with a rod across me, if that makes sense. And none of these setups really were that stable. And using this one's much stiffer. But when you mount things, they're too close to you. So I don't really use the inside rail much, except for, you know, anchor points and things like that. Here's one for my camera. That's sweet that you have both, because I picked up a couple of these from SAI, I think is the name of the company, and these are cool because they bridge these two rails, and then you've got a much more solid anchor point. I have one for my downrigger, and this one here for my fishing rod. So advantage Hobie in having much more robust rails. I like that. And then moving forward again to your actual, you can stick stuff under the seat here. You've got a very large storage area here in the Hobie, and this comes out, opening up the hull, so you can, you know, store stuff in there if you needed to. Not so much on the PDL, where really all you have is the storage here in the drive. So pretty limited. The advantage on the Old Town, though, is you got a lot of space underneath the seat, and it's even got that mesh pocket. So I mean, it's kind of a wash. I probably carry way too much crap I do with me fishing anyways, so having less storage really causes me to be a bit more efficient with what I'm picking and taking with me. So I don't know, that's kind of a wash, but having extra storage space is nice. Now let's talk about transducers. On the PDL, the access to the transducer mount place is through this spot here, and the transducer lives, let me see if I can film this better. The transducer lives here on the kayak, and as you can see, the entire hull provides protection to it. Sweet setup. I like that. Much better than Hobie's retractable setup. As you can see right now, it's deployed, but that transducer sits low and is not protected, and to compensate for that, Hobie created that rather complicated, I think, transducer plate that it's neat how it pops into the kayak, but I think that's all just added expense and unnecessary. I wish they had just molded the kayak such that there's a recessed space for it, as there is here. And you can see from underneath the hull, there's a lot more boat in the water with the Hobie than there is with the PDL. I think that's part of what contributes to the PDL speed. It's simply faster. My girlfriend has the Hobie Revolution. That's a fast boat, much faster than either of these two, but I'm able to keep up a lot better with her when I'm using the Old Town versus when I'm using the Hobie. Another point of kind of irritation for me is the fact that the Hobie's handles are here inside the boat. What a pain in the ass, excuse me. So to actually use the handle, you have to remove the seat. Big deal? No, not really, but that's superior, of course. It's right there, it's readily available. The Old Town handles are far more user-friendly. In the back, Hobie went with this bolted on handle, so it's just another point of vulnerability as far as I'm concerned. This is something else that could get damaged and rip a hole in your kayak. On the PDL, they're molded right into the kayak. Like, that's a no-brainer to me. So I really wish Hobie would do away with this and mold in some handles. And on the Outbacks, replace again the underside rudder with a flip down, much like the Revo has, the Revolution has. So handles win on the Old Town in terms of transport. And I do not trust this. In fact, it's already kind of fraying a little bit. Why, Hobie? Why? When, you know, how hard would it have been to do something like this? Much better. So Old Town wins in terms of handles. Another feature I really like about this Old Town is these recessions here on the side of the front here. When I'm launching, I'm able to just lay my poles down. And incidentally, this is where I keep my gaff when I'm fishing with this boat. So that's pretty sweet. I like that. In terms of pockets on the side, pretty similar. But Hobie gives you all of this space here. So you can put tackle boxes in there. And it's got these things. I never use them. So, you know, it's another expense, I think, in the cost of a Hobie that, you know, you might find usefulness to them. I don't. After a while, they don't even retract well anymore. So, and I'm in the salt a lot, so things get crunchy. So I like the simplicity of the Old Town. Again, back to the rails, these could be metal or just a better material. I don't like that. Okay, so moving on to probably the most important feature on a human-powered or leg-powered kayak are the drives. So, man, what neat engineering this is. Truly. Pretty fantastic. And the neat thing about the Hobie is that you can do the flutter in really shallow water. And if you're quick about it, you can actually have some decent speed doing that. Whereas this guy, it's set. There is no forgiveness. If you hit something because you weren't gauging it right, boom, you know, those go up. And you know that you made an impact, but it doesn't jar your body. I was out in Jenner, some shallow water, and there was a submerged tree, and when this thing hit, it just stopped me. It was almost like it threw me forward a little bit. Very jarring. That being said, this thing is robust. It's bulletproof, really. My understanding is that it even floats, although I haven't attempted that. I believe it's when this is closed off and you have this air pocket, it's sufficient to make this buoyant. On the Hobie, if you're not careful, you'll lose it. forever. The other thing is, like, this takes some serious banging and it's fine. This one, I landed once without pulling my drive and learned the hard way, because it just destroyed my spine. And $500 later, I've got a repaired spine, not a new one. $500 for a repair. And Hobie has a problem that's well recognized, in that their bearings in here are plastic. If these are too tense, and I have another video about that, it tends to put pressure up on these the bearings themselves, and it wears the whole thing out. So expect much higher maintenance with a Hobie drive, and this is a very expensive unit. Versus this one, you know, there's very little that's newer. You know, it's a chain drive essentially, so very robust. If you do get one of these, I highly recommend one of these aftermarket hand removable nuts. Why? Because this sucker gets tangled a lot. Especially in places with weedy grass. I fish out in Tamales Bay, and I found out very quickly that the advantage goes to the Hobie, because all you really need to do is flutter a little bit or just stop, and all the weeds and everything just fall off. They just slough off of this. Whereas once they're tangled in your prop, you're not going anywhere. And the reason why I recommend this is I ran into somebody else's fishing line. It got tangled up in there, and I was done. It did not move. So if you want something that's easy to clear, Hobie wins. The other thing is, when you're moving and you stop pedaling, these become a source of drag. And in fact, if you take your legs off of the pedal, you'll see that they will auto rotate as that water tension is pushing the prop along. Not necessarily a big deal, but on the Hobie, you can keep your legs on the drive and rest, and the Hobie won't lose speed. Because once these guys are just down in the water, or you have one leg extended or whatever, these are just basically gliding through the water. So, you know, a ton less resistance than this surface area. So if you stop pedaling, this will work as a brake. So advantage to Hobie in terms of gliding once you stop pedaling, if that makes any sense. The other thing that I think is an advantage that Old Town has is you can reverse instantly. So you're going forward, want to go backwards, no problem. So I'm able to stay on a spot with greater ease on this kayak than I am on this one, because reaching down and pulling these, frankly, is just a pain in the butt. So I'm not sure which has an advantage really overall, except that this one's gonna last a whole hell of a lot longer for you. And you know, I've only had this kayak less than 2 years, and I've already had to replace the spine, not the whole drive, because that would have been far more expensive, but with labor and fixing just this part, again, set me back $500. So dang it, you know, I think if overall, especially if you're not as gentle on your stuff, and I'm pretty hard on mine, this one's gonna last a whole heck of a lot longer. The mounting on it, on the Old Town, really straightforward. You know, this thing just sits in here, and then you lock it down, and that's it. And if you need to use it, it just, well, I'm not at a good angle to show you, but it just drops into its hole. Pretty sweet. I like that. There we go. Getting it to lock down is a little bit more tricky, but not too hard. And there you go. And when it's in, you know it's in. There's no ambiguity at all. You know, it's locked up front, it's locked in the back. You can tell it's in there. And there you go. The Hobie, not so much. I mean, it'll fall into these guys, and sometimes they'll latch properly, sometimes they won't. And you'll think it's all good. You start moving, and there's a side-to-side wiggle. Lots of stress on these two anchor points. So I'm not a very big fan of the mounting system on the Hobie drive versus this one here. I just feel like this is going to take a hell of a lot more beating and abuse and wear and tear than this very delicate drive. So Old Town definitely wins overall with its drive system. You're just going to give up you know, the ability to get in shallow water and still have some propulsion. But, you know, shallow water really is something that I'm not in that often, really. It's near the launch where that's an advantage. But you should be pulling your drives up anyways before you land your kayak. So what else can I say about the two? They're both wonderful, wonderful kayaks, for sure. Both very, very good kayaks. The difference in the $1,000, or a little bit over $1,000, the Hobie's a more expensive craft, is all the extra bells and whistles. You've got your, like I said, your multiple rail system, which is very handy. You got a place to put your oar on both sides. You can steer from both sides. So on the Outback, I mean on the PDL Old Town, you know, it comes with one rod holder. You can add another one if you want, no big deal. I do like that it's molded into the plastic. So what these screw into on the Hobie isn't a hole. So if you remove this thing, it's part of the roto molding that it threads into. So there's no way at all that you're going to create a leak or anything. Whereas if something traumatic were to rip this rod holder off of the Old Town, it'd just be another series of holes. So in terms of all, like I said, the rod mounts and things like that, I wish they would have roto molded it into the plastic, because those are weak points. The Hobie is a much heavier craft, I think. I'd have to look at the stats, but maneuvering this sucker is much more difficult than this one, partly because of the handles, etc. What else can I tell you? I think that about wraps it up. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments. I don't make videos with any kind of frequency at all, and usually for my own consumption or a client of mine in my home inspection business. So forgive the lack of editing or whatever. I just have this camera stuck to my head, and I'm doing just a quick impromptu little video because there's been some requests, and I'm one of the few guys who's blessed to have one of each of these kayaks. So there you have it. They're both wonderful, wonderful machines. If you're on a limited budget, I think, you know, the difference of $1,500, honestly, you could spend on getting extra rails, and you can outfit your Old Town with things you'll actually use and want, and not be spending on money on things that you may actually never use. Like these things I never ever use. These caps to cover the you know, the rod holders, they're silly, you know, so that's money spent that does nothing for you. All these mechanisms to, here's the thing that raises and lowers the transducer on the Hobie, complexity, and could have been easily solved with a simple molding